Hey, howdy. Checking in post-run. I just started in Pisgah National Forest and ran through, that gate is for the North Carolina Arboretum. And now I'm cooling down and walking back to my car. Yeah, today I thought we would talk about something else related to the Appalachian Trail. I get asked a lot about the animal encounters that I had on trail. And so I decided to just pick a couple and do a little story time about the critters that I saw on trail and had experiences with. So stick around if you want to hear a little bit of story time. It'll include a bear, a red squirrel / chipmunk, I'm not actually sure which one it was, and a moose. So if you want to hear stories about that, stick around. Animal encounter number one. These are going to kind of just coincidentally follow the trail heading north. So we'll start with the one that's the furthest south, which was my first bear encounter. And this story in particular stands out to me because it was also the day that I reconnected with some folks that I knew on trail. They kind of surprised me when they showed up at the shelter. And then I ended up hiking the rest of the trail with them. So it kind of stands out. It was the night that I reconnected with what then became my family. But this was in Tennessee, and it was the last couple miles of Tennessee. I at this point stayed at the shelter that was right before Damascus. I was at the very last shelter in Tennessee. And I can't remember the name of it at the moment, but I'll put it here. And I ate dinner, and while I was cooking my dinner was when the rest of the people showed up. And so they were kind of cooking dinner just slightly behind me. And so flash forward a little bit, I was cleaning up dinner and they were eating. And someone looked up and went, "Wait, what was that?" And this shelter is kind of positioned on the top of a ridge. It was sloped down on both sides. And just on the other side of the ridge, we could see a black bulge kind of moving. And of course, at this point in the trail, bears were kind of a common thing. Most folks were kind of had their head on swivel for them. So when someone saw movement, we all jumped and we all popped up from the picnic table where we were sitting and the shelter edge and ran over to the edge. To be clear too, we had space where someone saw something move was far enough away. We weren't just running at it. We were just running over to the edge where we could look down to see what was over there from a safe distance. And so that's what we did. And we looked over and sure enough, there was a bear. It was some sort of an old logging road or something like that they probably used to build the shelter that went kind of down that other slope. And in the middle of it, maybe, see if I can use my track math, maybe like 150 meters down, was a bear. Medium sized, definitely more than a year old, maybe even more than 2 years old, but not huge, if that makes sense. Time of year, this was also April, I'm pretty sure, early April. And we could see the bear and it was just moving its head around like this, sniffing the air, and we could tell that it smelled our dinners and was essentially patiently waiting. And nobody was nervous about it. Everyone just made a lot of comments about make sure you get all of your trash, make sure you put everything that smells up for the night, put it up well, because we knew that bear wasn't going to bother us, but it was going to come looking to make sure that we had properly stored our food. And I couldn't tell you if it did because I slept peacefully through the night after that. It did take me a moment, every little snapping twig I thought was the bear coming and sniffing around. Again, though, wasn't worried for myself. My only concern was that my bear can was going to go rolling down the other side of the hill. So luckily that didn't happen. That is my encounter with the bear, my first bear sighting at least. All right, next story, we're going to flash way ahead on trail to New Hampshire. I'm so glad that I live in a place that still has things that are green. In the winter, you know, we've of course got the white pines and Virginia pines and hemlocks and the conifers, but I'm talking about things like the rhododendron and the dog hobble and mountain laurels and things like that that stay out all year long and have a little pop of color. And the hollies, there's some hollies in here. So for this story, I don't actually know what animal it was. It was either a red squirrel, because we were up north where the red squirrels were, or a chipmunk. It was not a mouse. It was bigger than that, but it happened so fast, I couldn't tell you exactly what it was. So this day, it wasn't New Hampshire. Sorry, it was Maine, southern Maine. This day, we had stayed at a hostel and had gone back to trail the next morning with my family. And our plan was to go, I believe it was something like 15 miles over the next couple mountains and then stay at a shelter. And it turned out that it was absolutely pouring and nobody was feeling it. We had also at this point mapped out the rest of the trail, and we knew that we had some flexibility. We didn't have to rush to the end, and I'm so glad we did that. And so we knew we had some mileage to kind of play with and be flexible with. And so it was 4 or 5 miles into our day was the first shelter that we would come across. And we just were feeling bleh, kind of collectively as a group. It was raining. It was a little bit on the chilly side, but that wasn't too bad. We just weren't really feeling it. And so we decided to call the day early. And so we stopped there. We only did 5 miles that day. We holed up in the shelter. We got there at like lunchtime. You know, we'd gotten out mid-morning. And we ate lunch and just set up our sleep stuff and hung out at the shelter. We played cards. It was a great time. It rained all day. So we're at this shelter super early, and you know, everyone's doing different things. Sparky, Cyclo, and I were playing some card game. I think Moose was watching a TV show. I don't know what Tech was doing. And Magpie was on the far side of the shelter next to the wall, and she was taking a nap. And previously, she had had a little snack or part of her lunch, I'm not sure, and that was an apple. It was, you know, the day after a hostel in town, so we got to carry out some fruits and veggies. And so she had eaten an apple, and then because we were all sitting there, you know, no one's going to bed, we still have all of our food and smellables, obviously, because it's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We're gonna have to cook dinner. And she was wrapped up and had set her apple core, you know, she's laying on the shelter, and the apple core is like above her head, between the top of her head and the edge of the shelter at the front. And we're not, you know, making too much noise. We're, you know, chit-chatting and giggling, but we're not, you know, boisterous and super loud. And it happened so fast. Either a red squirrel or a chipmunk, not sure which, popped up, scaled the side of the shelter inside, sat down in front of Magpie, grabbed her apple core, stuck it in its mouth, you know, bit onto it. It was larger than the head of the animal. Turned on its side, scaled the wall back, and disappeared. Just right there, right in front of all of us. Not a care in the world that there were 6 humans in this shelter, you know, risked whatever for itself for this apple core. And it just cracked me up. Only, I think, one other person even saw a flash of movement. I was the only person who saw it as well as even I did, and that's not very well in itself. But it just, that stands out so much. as probably I'll say this one wins the award of the bravest animal that I had an encounter with on the Appalachian Trail. Okay, and my final story is about a moose, which is kind of has the same feelings as the bear in the south. Everyone's got their head on swivel for a bear. You get up north and suddenly it switches and people have their head on swivel for moose, which are supposedly a bit more aggressive if you get in their space than a bear. So for one, it's just because everybody wants to see one, but then it's also got a little bit of an edge of safety. So it was somewhere in Vermont that we caught wind that the first moose sighting had happened. And from that point on, for my family, we were on high alert. And it didn't really come down. We were just on high alert watching for moose the remainder of the Appalachian Trail, which is a good ways. And like several hundred miles, a good ways. And we got all the way to Baxter State Park, and a couple of my family members had spotted one in the 100-mile wilderness, which is the last little 100 miles, and it leads you right up to Baxter State Park and the base of Mount Katahdin. So that's kind of, we were thinking, our last chance to see a moose. And a couple of our family members saw a moose in there. And that's awesome for them. I did not. And Sparky notably did not. And we were pretty bummed about that. We were like, man, it's okay. But we were really hoping to see a moose while we were out here and while we're up here in the Northeast. And so on the day that we left the 100-mile wilderness, my family's plan was to stay at the Katahdin Streams campground that is right there at A-Ball Bridge. Not to be confused with the Katahdin Streams campground within the state park. Very confusing. A bird. We were gonna stay right there. So we exited the park and the campground was right there. We ended up getting amazing trail magic right at A-Ball Bridge. Met some friends that we'd kind of been crossing paths with again. And we went into the campground, we set up all of our stuff. And it was in the in-between of setting up our stuff and eating dinner. We had a little bit of time there, and we heard tale that someone had seen a moose just then on A-Ball Bridge Road, right where the AT comes out onto it. And Sparky and I perked up and were like, where? And we went in search of it, which is not far away. And we walked back to the Appalachian Trail, or backwards on the Appalachian Trail, essentially to where it goes into the 100-mile wilderness. We walked into the 100-mile just a little bit, walking slow, watching both sides, didn't see anything, came back out, thought maybe they didn't actually mean on the trail. There was, another little side road that scooted over close to the same area. And we were like, well, why don't we walk down that and just see if we can see it? Maybe it wandered that way. And so we walked down that way. We walked past the Appalachian Trail on A-Ball Bridge Road. We went all over. We talked to the people at Trail Magic again. We were everywhere. And we eventually gave up. We walked around for about 45 minutes just looking for a moose that we had been told was around and didn't see anything. And so we're walking back. We're about to cross over A-Ball Bridge for like the 17th time that day. And there's vehicles going back and forth on this road. It's a pretty wide dirt path. And there's this Jeep, a soft top Jeep with some folks in it. And it rolls down its window, and my safety alarms went off in my head because he was leaning out the window to talk to us. And he said, "Hey ladies, did you see that moose?" And both of us immediately were kind of down because we were like, no, we didn't. You know, we were just looking for it. We couldn't find it. And he goes, no, right there. And we turned around, and on the exact road that we had just walked way down and come back, there was a moose crossing the road. And we stood there, and I got extremely little footage of it. Both of us, I think, squealed a little bit and were like, oh my God, finally, like the last absolute chance that we had to see a moose on the Appalachian Trail. It lasted all of like 3 seconds before it disappeared back into the brush on the other side, but we at least saw it. And it was the wildest adventure just trying to find this moose. And frankly, the moose probably watched us walk up and down the road and thought, these crazy thru hikers, and then waited until we went away to cross the road. But yeah, it was great nonetheless to see a moose in the Northeast on the Appalachian Trail. All right, y'all, there's my stories. Just a little bit of story time, some of my top animal encounters on the AT. Of course, so many more that I had. But I have been trying to do this thing where I recount stories, and it's at the encouragement too of my mom that I do that to help hold on to the memories by repeating them. And so there may be some more like this that you see. If there's more story times or certain types of story times that you guys want to hear, let me know in the comments. This is currently the only one I actually have planned, but I can do more fairly easily and quickly. Because I love sharing and I love telling stories about my experiences. It's fun for me to relive them, and hopefully it's fun for you guys to hear. So, all right, I'm almost back to my car here. So I'm gonna go and clean up before work. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Stay warm and find some way of getting outside and appreciating the winter sky.